My name is Nuno. I'm talking from the south of Portugal. I'm coordinator of Recife, a network of collaborative initiatives for an ecosystemic future here in the south of Portugal, and at the same time curating educational activities with the Emergence Network, which is a network of people who are trying to think in different ways about change and about how we can approach today's world, uh, looking to our blind spots and to different ways of seeing. And I'm here talking with Alan Kaplan and Sue Davidoff from Proteus Initiative in South Africa. At the moment, they are in New Zealand, near Auckland, in the antipodes of where I am. So we've just been talking a bit about how amazing it is that we are in opposite sides of the planet and still have the possibility to have this talk. So very grateful for all the amazing, infinite things that allowed us to be here now, and acknowledge that. And then to say deep thank you to the two of you for finding the space in your busy agenda and crazy traveling around the world to share your gifts. So thankful and grateful for being here with you. And we have this talk because we are hosting for the first time together a couple of meetings in the south of Portugal in February 2018. And I'm so excited about it. And I just wanted to find a way that could give a glimpse to people who never heard about your work or trying to now start to have a contact with it and with the work we are doing here in the south of Portugal, to have a kind of a glimpse of what they might expect from a meeting here with us in February, and be perhaps called to join the adventure and be open to unexpected things. So recognizing that it's going to be very hard to describe fully what is going to take place there, I wanted to start our conversation, our short conversation, inviting you just to do a short presentation in whatever feels alive and meaningful for you today about who you are and what gives you, what excites you in today's world in terms of the work you are doing with around the world and these days in New Zealand.
So, as Nuno said, I am Sue Davidoff. I live together with Alan in Cape Town, South Africa, where the Proteus Initiative was born. And perhaps it would be helpful to start off by saying why we call ourselves the Proteus Initiative, because Proteus was the Greek god of change, and we call ourselves the Proteus Initiative because of the recognition and understanding and experience that if you're working in the social world, then you're working with the understanding that everything is in movement all the time. Everything is changing. Nothing is static, just like in the natural world. So in the social world, everything is in movement. And in order to be able to meaningfully engage with social process, we have to be able to recognize and to be able to see the movement. What we've discovered that I think is really important is that when something is in movement all the time, you cannot actually perceive the movement. It looks still, even though it is in movement. We're unable to perceive the movement of a flower or a plant in growth. We're unable to really perceive the turning of the tides. Everything that is in movement all the time with that continuity is invisible. And at the same time, it's that movement that is generating our social and natural realities. So our work as Proteus as the Greek god of change, had to learn to recognize, and not only recognize, but anticipate those moments of change in order to be effective in terms of what he was needing to do. And I think that at heart, that is what we are working with and towards.
So I'm just going to try and take it from there, actually, because I'm thinking, so we're working with change. All activists are working with change. We're either trying to change something or we're trying to stop things changing. But somehow activists are working with change. And this question of change already becomes a question for us. And I'm saying this now because I have a memory of being here in New Zealand, working in New Zealand some years ago, the first time we did, and then returning to South Africa. And we then drove from this New Zealand reality, which is an island in the midst of a huge ocean. We came back to South Africa, which is a land mass that stretches almost forever with an ocean very in the vast distance away from us. And we drove from Johannesburg to Cape Town.
1,400 kilometers.
1,400 kilometers on our return journey. And we woke up very early in the middle of the semi-arid area of South Africa, the semi-desert, between Johannesburg and Cape Town. We woke up very early one morning and we started driving, continuing on our way to Cape Town. And we started before dawn. And we saw the dawn arising. We saw the night disappearing in the one direction and the day appearing in the other direction, even before the sun rose. And we were very cognizant of the fact that on the other side of the world, which we had just come from, which was New Zealand, the opposite was happening. The day was approaching, the night was approaching, and the day was disappearing. And suddenly this realization of the word turning rather than change, that everything is turning all the time. And when we speak about change, we sometimes get the sense that we can control that change. But in fact, everything, a plant, an animal, ourselves, and any social situation we're involved with is in a process of turning. If it's not in a process of turning, actually it becomes static and dead and stuck. How do we shift our way of seeing so that we can see that process of turning and accompany that process of turning, rather than imagine that we can ourselves change something from one thing to another? So we're trying to practice a way of social intervention, let's say, that is respectful of what's actually happening on the ground in that social situation, rather than imposing from the outside. We're trying to get inside through our very way of thinking and through our very way of observing what's happening. That's where we're really coming from.
Okay, so I'm sensing obviously a big difference between that approach and the common scientific way of observing and analyzing things from like an objective standpoint, like that you could be separate from the object you are observing and into a much more alive context where there's actually no separation. Things are always in relationship, and so we need to figure out how we can be sensing organs of that movement we are part of, and that just by being there we play a part here. So I'm curious, like, can you unfold a bit of what can we expect in terms of practices or of explorations together in Portugal?
Shall I start?
Okay.
So you have given some beautiful keys and clues to some of the work that I think that we're hoping to be doing when we get together in Portugal. One of the things that you have said is that we are never separate from that which we are observing or engaging with, that we are always part of whatever situation we find ourselves in. So the entire process that we will be engaged in will be a participatory process. We're not going to be sitting and talking about things, and neither of us will be giving lectures about various ways of intervening meaningfully into social situations. We're going to be learning through our own participation all the way through. And another beautiful key that you offer, Nuno, is that you speak about deep listening. And I think that in a way, one of the things I was going to say earlier is that we have to develop new faculties in ourselves in order to be able to see that which is invisible, but which is generating and giving rise to the visible world around us. And that which is invisible is the ongoing movement, which I spoke about earlier, or the turning, which means that we have to learn to see the world through living eyes, because it is a living process that we are witnessing. So we will be working with deep listening and deep observation, because when we observe deeply, the more deeply we observe, the more we see, and the more we see, the more we are able to see deeper and deeper into that invisible movement, which is part of what creates the social world. And then the other really important thing that you speak about is relationship, that everything is in relationship to everything else all the time. Nothing that is alive stands separate from anything else. We were just reading an article this morning about the demise, the fact that there are so, I don't know how to put it, but fewer insects. There has been research into how the number of insects, it's a research piece that has been done in Germany, has reduced by 75% over the last, is it 20, however many years. Mm. And the implications for all of life around the reduction of these insects. We have so little real experience or knowing of the ways in which we are all interdependent, and interdependent on the tiniest insects that inhabit our planet. And so part of the work that we're doing is not to talk about interconnection or not to talk about relationship, but to work with living experiences of all of these aspects of the turning and living process and life.
So we're going to be working with observation, with respect to living process. We're going to be working with nature. We're going to be working with social situations. We're going to be working with ourselves. We're going to be observing the processes of life rather than the products of life. So we're going to work hard on building the kind of observation and the kind of thinking, because there's a relationship between observation and imagination, observation and the way we think, how we make meaning of what we see and what we hear. We're going to be working on all of that in an attempt to get inside the fabric of life, but actually to, as you say, to get inside rather than to talk about getting inside, to have the experiences and to really see things on a different level. So when we talk about observation and we talk about deep listening, we're talking about getting to actually see the processes of life rather than simply to say, well, process is different from product. We have to work differently with process and so on. That's all true. But how do we begin to see that movement? How do we begin to see the invisible threads that link? How do we begin to see relationship? So we're going to be working with all of that. We're also going to be working on another level. I guess it's all the same level, but it's different aspects of it, which is about our own reflection on ourselves. So when we talk about a delicate activism, we talk about reflecting on our own activism and not assuming that the issues are out there, but rather opening ourselves to this understanding that the way that we change the world is through being changed by the world. We're not, there's a great danger that we ourselves as activists become managers. We're still trying to control, we're still trying to predict, we're still trying to intervene in a way that we think will change things. It's very, very radical turning to imagine that through observation, just through observation, not observation in order to change something, but to really understand something, that something will begin to change already. We're going to be working with all of those understandings, but more than understandings, the actual activities that enable us then to reflect. So we
to
will
experience.
To experience, reflect. Yeah. We will go out, we will do things, and we will then talk about them rather than talking about them.
No, can I say one more thing? Just because I thought about it as you were speaking, but before that perhaps the greatest kind of activism that we are looking at is, you mentioned being changed by the world, but also the understanding is that the way that we see the world is the world that we create. So what we see and how we see it is what we are creating. So it becomes an enormous responsibility to begin to see and understand the world from a place of understanding its living process and movement, in order to participate in a healing relationship with the world.
So I want to say something now quickly. Just to say, in terms of a workshop process with us, we're trying to describe it now, and it's kind of impossible to describe. But what happens for people often is that they come on the process and then they go where they have to describe it back home, to community, to an organization, whatever. And it's quite difficult because we're so immersed in the actual experience. And sometimes people come away and say, I'm not sure what we did. I'm not sure what the exact, I can't relay to you this or that or the other, but I know that I'm different. I know that I'm now being in the world in a different way. I think that's what we're working towards. That we ourselves be in the world differently, rather than that we think we can now have tools. This is not about tools. It's not about techniques. It's about the other side of change. It's about being change, being in movement.
Yeah, thank you so much. I wanted already that we start tomorrow. I could go and travel and meet you and join you in New Zealand. And yeah, I was hearing and thinking, there was a few things that touched me deeply, in the sense that we are kind of, I feel we are in a moment of history that's with huge level of disruption, of multiple crises on a scale never seen before by human beings. So it's like really sometimes very overwhelming, and there's all these potentials and possibilities dancing in the moment that we are in. And so I kind of really connect with this need for being present in a different way to how life is unfolding, and through that become more conscious about what we want to connect with and serve, and how we can find our place. So one of the things that touched me deeply was the Sue mentioning about healing, which I think is really on a very strong aspect of most of the things that are at the root cause of the problems we have. Because it's true, we tend to look to the outside to look for the problems, and actually come to terms with the fact that we all bear some multiple levels of trauma for multiple reasons, having grown up in a world of male dominance, of white dominance in a way. I grew up in a country that never came to terms with their colonial past, and so there's all sorts of different things that play in a role. I feel it deeply today when I'm a parent, a father, and try to find a role to be a man and the parent and the father without any role model, you know. So the role models I have from my ancestors do not serve anymore. So there's all these challenges, and I wonder, like, how you see, just some glimpse of how you see your work in this moment with all this disruption and all these possibilities also for change, considering something that was not tackled yet, which is this huge push for polarization, for either you are against or in favor, and with all the build of further separation with that kind of stretching of poles. And I know your work involves going beyond that, so I want to open a space a bit just to go in closing our talk, but to still have the possibility to unfold a bit of that.
I think from the beginning for us, I mean, from the beginning of our practice, this has always been about consciousness. And what you're describing, I think what we are experiencing now is a moment of the gravity of where we have brought ourselves, the gravity of where our way of thinking, how our way of thinking influences our way of being and seeing, how those influence each other, and how we then are in the world. And we come to a place now of extreme separation. All of these crises that we're talking about for me come out of a place of extreme separation. We are separate from the world, and the world is a resource to be used. So even those who are desperately defending or wanting to change the way things are going often fall into the same, for me, the same trap of using words like we have to protect our resources, we have to manage our resources. Actually, they're not our resources. So how do we take the place we've come to, not go back to another time, not imagine that we can go back to another time when we weren't separate, but rather how can we take the what we gain through this separation, because we do gain great powers, in fact, of observation, of understanding, of working with. Separation is not an entirely negative thing at all. But the process of separation has taken us to this place of crisis. How can we move through to a new consciousness where we are able to bring a self-reflective, conscious unity and participation into our way of being in the world? Not an ancient, not an unconscious participation, but a very, very rigorous attempt to, in our ability to be self-reflective. Self-reflection comes from the process of separation, actually. We are able to see ourselves because there is a separation. Can we then build on that separation in order to become much more aware, much more conscious of how we are in the world, to see what we're doing in the world, and to then live a different way of being? That's how I would respond to what you're, to where we are, because otherwise there is this danger that we simply continue to make the attempt to manage something that's going out of control, and it is going out of control. And when we see this polarization, what I'm experiencing is the further we get out of control, the more there are these attempts to manage.
And I would like to say, from a slightly different perspective, that I think that it's very, very easy to become overwhelmed at this time by what's happening, the disruptions that you speak about, the unprecedented disasters that are happening all around. It is very easy to become immobilized, paralyzed, depressed, angry, reactive, overwhelmed by everything. And I think that a very, very important aspect of how we find our way to be has to do with connecting very deeply with ourselves and building a sense of self that is grounded in our own inner striving and our own inner sense of purpose. And I think that somehow that there is a path which I would call an inner path, which is on some level the grounding for the outer work that we're doing. And those two need to go together. That without really grounding ourselves in our own deep sense of self and purpose, it's very easy to become completely drawn out and overwhelmed by what's happening.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, we could be speaking for a long time around these big challenges that we face and how we need to perhaps also embrace the things that often in activism I see people trying to exclude, and that is again inner work, because it's also excluding parts of ourselves that perhaps we don't like, and so this kind of also performs on the and builds on the level of separation that Alan was speaking about, and that's where so much healing is needed. So I would still like to invite you to have some final words for everybody who took the time to listen to us in this recording, and say something to invite them to come in, join us in February, and be open to whatever might emerge from this beautiful encounter that we are inviting and hosting together in Algarve.
Actually, I think my final word is to you, Nuno. Thank you for making it possible that we do come to Portugal, to your peninsula in the south of Portugal, because what I'm really, really looking forward to is being there.
I wanted to say, I hope that what we've spoken about somehow is enough to generate some interest for people. My interest, I have been longing to go to Portugal for years and years. I've never been there. It feels very much part of our early history in South Africa. So it feels like there's a very deep connection, and there's some wonderful conversations that I'm looking forward to having that connect us through the literature that has come out of Portugal, which gives very powerful pictures of the destiny of South Africa. And so I'm looking forward to meeting what feels familiar to me, but will be a completely new experience. So yes, and looking very forward to meeting you in person, Nuno, and working alongside you.
Just to say, we've done a lot of work in Brazil, and Brazil was once upon a time supposed to be the new Portugal, and then things changed. So
yeah, it's interesting. One of the things I just recalled, it was the last time I was in Johannesburg. I had the privilege to see Hugo Masekela live, and I love him so much. Yeah. He's brilliant, and it was so funny because he sang this song about a guy that in Portuguese history is like an hero. So this guy, this traveler, this sailor man who went to cross the Cape, and the song just goes like Vasco da Gama, he ain't no friend of mine. and it flipped the coin, and I think that's so enriching that we kind of also close these circles and have full perspective of how much things we can tell different stories about similar events, and that's like for me is one of the exciting things about meeting the two of you, and perhaps the rest of the people who join us in this meeting in the South, is that every time we meet and we remember, we reconfigure the past. So the past is always in motion, just like the present and the future, that possibilities. So I'm looking forward to explore these possibilities of reconfiguring and remembering things together. Thank you so much for your time. Have a great time in New Zealand, and we'll keep in touch and take care of yourselves.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Manoj.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Goodbye.